For the longest time, I've always wanted to build myself my very own home theater. Personally, I love to be completely immersed in a movie, so I cannot stand the distractions that might happen at a public theater, and I like to have that opportunity to pause the movie if need be and go get some more popcorn. In today's day and age, we are actually even seeing more and more movies that are released directly to streaming services, so I think that it's about time that I finally accomplish this goal and get this home theater project underway. Now, first things first, before we can get into the 5 questions that we need to research in order to plan our home theater properly, there are a couple of things that we need to know. The first thing that we should ask ourselves is, what is this home theater going to be for? Is it for game day and watching sports? Is it for watching action-packed movies? Is it for sitting down and more listening to music? Or is it a combination of these different things? We need to know that, as those choices can impact the gear that we need to select. Personally, I love high-quality sound and action movies, so you guys will be able to see how those preferences build into what we're choosing for this system. And here's the finished home theater! Just kidding, ignore this. We're going to be getting rid of that, and our projector screen is going to be going on this wall. But the other thing we want to consider before we really start this process is we want to know our room dimensions. We want to measure the width of the room, we want to measure the depth of the room, specifically knowing where the seating area is going to be, and we also want to measure the height of the room. Now that we know what we will generally be using the home theater for and the rough dimensions of the room, we are armed to start our conversation and answer the 5 different questions that we need to research. Now, to answer these questions, I was able to connect with an expert advisor from Crutchfield. On this channel, I mainly do car audio projects, and I've used Crutchfield for many, many years, long before I even started the channel, because they've always had excellent customer service. I knew that picking out the gear for my home theater build, one of the Crutchfield advisors would definitely help me get set up right. Crutchfield was cool enough to sponsor this video. You can get the same help I did by working with one of their experts. If you guys want to learn more and take advantage of a special offer, you can check out the links down in the video description. Let's go talk to Crutchfield advisor Paul and get into those 5 questions. So today I'm joined by Paul, and Paul is one of Crutchfield's home theater advisor experts. And Paul, I have to ask, I mean, you've probably designed, what, hundreds of systems over the years? What's the number? Do you have any idea?
Easily thousands of systems. You know, I've been here at Crutchfield since September of 2003, and you know, that predates HDMI. So I've designed component video systems when HDMI came around, designed those. Of course, you know, multi-room, single room setups, you know, you name it, I've easily designed some version of it.
He's done it all, so he is the man to talk to. So that's what's super cool when you work with Crutchfield. You get to work with a guy like this. Paul has tons of experience. We're going to run through the 5 different questions with Paul, and just to give us a rough idea of what we should be thinking about when we're planning our home theater. So Paul, question number 1, this is something that, you know, when I've been talking with you, that we definitely wanted to make sure that we considered, just so you had it in mind. Do we plan to use any pre-existing equipment in our system?
Yes, that's always like a good starting place, because then we find out if there's stuff already there, and you know, we're just wanting to add in a couple extra speakers, expand, you know, maybe go to a bigger TV, switch out to a projector. And we also, you know, helps with one key aspect of home theater. It's layman's terms, voice matching. We need, like if I was walking around the room and I was in the movie, we need my voice to sound the same no matter which speaker it's playing on. So knowing if we have some that we want to already integrate, you know, and try to reuse, that goes a long way to helping make sure that we maintain that, because it's crucial.
Yeah, so that's one of the cool things about home theater, right? Is like you can make a small investment up front and, you know, just maybe, you know, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, but maybe do like, you know, a couple of front speakers and a center channel. And then in the future, you could add the surround sound, and then you could even upgrade to the Atmos. So I'm sure that's something that comes up quite often that you want to consider and think about, you know, what gear do you already have? And you did mention before, is it pretty common that, you know, sometimes people might have the speakers already up in the ceiling? Is that something that people could always use for Atmos, or is it kind of situation dependent?
It's definitely situation dependent, because the speakers need to be in the right location, for the Atmos. And when you start off with a basic Dolby Atmos or also DTSX, because they kind of have similar requirements.
Right.
But when you start off with a basic one, it's front Atmos. So if a previous system had speakers in the front that were not in the ceiling, and the ones that are in the ceiling are in the back. The
Mhm.
only way that we can integrate it, and at least for now, would be to have additional speakers, installed into the front for the Atmos, and then we can find set up like a 5.1.4. The
Mhm.
4 meaning 2 fronts Atmos and then 2 rear Atmos.
So that's perfect, actually, that you mentioned that, because that leads well into our next question that we want to be considering is, how many speakers do we want for our system? How would you help answer that? Is it defined by, what I want to do in the room size? What kind of defines how many speakers we should be using?
Well, actually, both of those, and even the seating arrangement, because like a basic home theater system, would be like a 5.1. You have front left, front right, center. Then you have a subwoofer you place somewhere in the room, and then you have 2 surround speakers. Now, if your seating is not against the back wall, but maybe more out into the middle of the room, now you can look at having the front 3, the back 2, and side surround speakers. So
Right.
you could actually step up, if the space allows it, you can step up to a 7.1 and get motion going all around you, behind, beside, and in front. So if a plane's or a truck's driving by, you actually hear it moving the entire way because you got speakers that it can fade into.
Gotcha. So just to reiterate, so that first number, that's always the number of actual surround speakers, and then the second number is the quantity of subwoofers, right?
Hmm.
And
Yes.
then one of the newest technologies is that adds those height speakers with the Dolby Atmos, and in that case, that's the third number. So you could have like, I think what we're actually planning for our system, and I want to pull up the layout here. I think we're actually planning on doing a 5.2.2. So there's going to be 5 surround speakers, and then the 2 subwoofers, and which I still need to determine the locations. But then ultimately there will be the point 2, the last point 2, which is those Atmos up in the ceiling.
Yes, that is correct. I help keep it simple for people to understand, I usually refer to the first number as the main speakers.
The mains.
Because these are the ones that will be, most actively used. Also, ideally placed, closer to ear level. So that way it helps out, does a better job with the directional. And then we can mix in, the subs, 1 or 2. You always want 1, because otherwise your action movies just won't sound like action.
Right.
They'll sound like fireworks instead of explosions. And then 2 subs helps balance the bass better within the room. So that way you don't have areas where the room acoustics increases the bass, or just because the sound waves join and they increase or decrease. The sound waves come together and start canceling each other out, and so it seems weaker.
Yeah,
2 subs always allows that to not be an issue.
yeah. I'm glad you told me that, because I love my bass and I want it to be, super solid everywhere in the room, and that's a great point.
And then the Atmos, right now it's typically 2 or 4. So on the final number, you'll usually see a 0.2 or a 0.4. On some really advanced, more dedicated home theater systems, like you're actually setting up a theater room,
Hmm.
you can actually have a 0.6. You can have front, middle, and back Atmos speakers to
Right.
kind of coincide with your front, surround, and rear surround speakers.
And a lot of that, like between the point 0.2 or point 0.4 or point 0.6, a lot of that is probably defined based on the room dimensions, right? Like the overall
Mhm.
depth. Like obviously you're probably not, like my room is far too small to ever have it make sense for a point 0.6 or even point 0.4, really. Like I think based on what we talked about, point 0.2 ended up being the best choice.
Yes, yeah. See, you have to see in a dedicated theater room. You wouldn't put your seats in the back. Your seating would be more centered. You might even do split level seating with theater chairs, so you have a front row and a second row raised. But yeah, it definitely is room dependent. And in your room, where your seating was going to be basically on the back wall,
Hmm.
we really couldn't go. The point four. When you add in the rear atmos, they really need to go behind you. They cannot go to the side. They do need to be behind you by at least a couple feet, if not
Really?
more.
Okay.
So seating on the back wall, pretty much ruins the effect of the rear atmos.
Gotcha.
And and you have to be able to do the rear atmos before you could really consider like what I refer to as the middle atmos. Adding in the extra speakers to make that last number a point 0.6.
Gotcha. Gotcha. That's good to know. Yeah. So, so much of it is defined on those initial room dimensions. So,
Hmm.
it's always good to have that information before we talk to somebody like yourself. And that is a perfect segue because that leads into, I'm sure this is a common question. What size screen should I get? At what point do we go from like a TV being a good choice to probably being a better choice to step up to a projector?
Yeah, yeah. Seating distance does impact it a little bit. Not so much in, oh, hey, now I'm sitting so far back and there's a maximum. It's really more of a minimum. Like, if you're sitting 10 feet back, you really don't get the lifelike experience from a 45, 49, 55, and some instances even a 65-inch TV. Seating distance does impact the screen size and the goals. It's if you want, if you're wanting a family room, like a living room, a den that you're just making also into an entertainment room, you probably don't want a screen that that'll just be there, be blank, getting in the way of other things. You might
Right.
go for more of a TV. But if you're, say, you have it's a spare room that you're actually just making into an entertainment room, that's a perfect room for getting going into the projector and the screen, because it's not a primary room. Uh, and the reason I mentioned not being a primary room is bulb life,
Mhm.
or lamp, depending upon the projector and what they call it. But basically, they have a certain amount of hours that they're rated to run, and then they either give out or they're not being bright enough to be like or to actually give a good picture of what you paid for. So you end up replacing it more often.
Right.
So we have to take that into consideration too. Am I all right with replacing the lamp every so often to still have the experience if it is if it is going to be a primary room,
Mhm.
or if not, if it's a secondary, then it's you're not looking at replacing the bulb every 6 months. You're going to more of the typical 2 to 5 years. You know,
Right. So if I understand correctly, it kind of depends if like I know our kids, we have like the TV on sometimes just kind of passively, like just for them to watch, but they might be playing or whatever. You might not necessarily want to be doing that with a projector because like you mentioned the bulb life, a projector is for more, when you want to sit down, have that experience, be totally immersed and enjoy a movie.
and yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you definitely wouldn't want to have this on 6 to 8 hours a day,
Yeah.
because that would be like 6 months and your bulb's gone.
Oh man. Whew.
And then that they can be 200 to 300 or so for replacements, and so now you're looking at 1,000 every year just to keep up a good image.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's a more of a, hey, it's a movie, it's now movie night, or it's game day, it's a special event, and I want to have that wow experience. Projectors are great for that.
I'm going to pull it up on screen here, but here we came up with 120 inch being the best screen size. Was there like a formula that you used in order to determine that?
Uh, I don't have any set formula, because everybody's goals are different.
Okay.
What I'd like to do is kind of get a feel for what type of wow factor are we looking for. Am I all right with having a bigger screen? Do I have the wall space for it? And am I sitting? am I sitting back far enough to enjoy it? So
Right.
I always try to analyze view. The viewing distance is crucial, and having the space for it is also crucial. Not just the screen, but your center channel speaker and your front left and front right at least, because those are the three main. Even if you're doing just a truncated theater system, you got to have those three to be able to enjoy a movie.
Right.
Dialogues on the center channel, a lot of the main action and people approaching, their conversation will be on the front channels. So you kind of have to have those three, and you have to have space for it. So I always look at that aspect to see what our maximum will be, and then how far back will be the seating. The
Okay.
average viewing distance, the closest that people will be sitting, and if they are going to be sitting closer than ideal, are you the type of person that would maybe go into a commercial movie theater and sit within the first three rows? Do you
Right.
find that okay, or do you just never just never do it?
Right.
So it's really more of a balance of my approach is definitely more of a balance of spacing, positioning, and that sort of thing. But I do know that on our website we have some helpful articles that if you're just not sure, have no preferences, looking for comfort, more so than wow factor, we actually do have a guide that will help you out with giving recommended.
It's interesting that you bring that up because we always hear about those guidelines that you should go with, but with you having the experience, that's good. That I mean, what generally makes people more excited and more happy. So it is good to analyze what you are actually looking for experience wise and everything else out of the system.
Yeah. I use that earlier on. I did use those recommendations as, oh, hey, let's do this. Let's strive for this. But everybody's different.
Mhm.
I'm the guy that sits mid theater because I do. I don't want to look down. I don't want to look up. I feel like that's the sweet spot for me. But if you're sitting that front row and you're looking up, that is wow. That is the big screen.
Yeah.
And some people prefer it. I've got some friends that will always sit, a lot closer than I do. And so we either split up at the theater, or we compromise.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or
Right.
if it's packed, we just go where we need to. But yeah, I try to be more personal preference, if there is any, than say like industry recommendation.
Right.
You know, because in the end, you're going to be the one that's going to be using it. We've got to, we want to make you happy.
Hmm.
So yeah, and I don't think there's no one shoe fits everybody, no one size that fits everybody. So I kind of think the same thing about screen size.
Hmm.
There's just no one set rule to go by that works for everybody.
Right.
Now it's a good starting point, and if you're not sure yourself on what you might be comfortable with, it's a good safe guide to go by. But no, I I like to always gear my recommendations around what you want, what the customer wants.
Right. That's good. All right, so we've talked about the screen, we've talked about the speakers. We know that we, of course, need something like a receiver for the home theater system. But our next question is, what other gear could we need to really bring this system together?
Oh yeah. There's of course that main gear. Then there's also and this kind of relates to again your goals for how lively you might want the sound to be.
Hmm.
See, home theater receivers, their power rating is always just with 2 channels driven. And the hidden meaning behind that is the more channels you turn on, the less watts that are available for all the channels.
Oh, so it actually divides up that power?
It's not like, oh, hey, I had 100 watts per channel, 2 channels driven. I've got 4 channels on. So it's not a true divide by 2 and you're getting 50.
Okay.
It's shared. It's more of a less steep drop off with the power. But if it's a really lively scene and all channels are needing the power to be able to produce their audio, like there's explosions going on all around, and and so we need to be able to produce some of that directional mid-bass audio that takes a little bit more power. We're now, our main channels, which again has the majority of it, is suffering because the back channels need some of that extra power to keep up. So we're not necessarily getting the best experience we could, or even the same sound that we would have, with just explosions happening on the front.
Gotcha.
That won't even sound the same.
So what's the solution for that?
That's where power amps come in.
Yes.
Home theater receivers, again, when you get to more mid-level or high-end, they'll have preamp outputs for at least the main channels, the front left and right. And some will even have preamp outputs for all the channels. So if we're wanting, again, if we're a big action movie buff, Marvel fan, Star Wars fan, and we want to, or the new Fast and Furious movie comes out and we want to.
You're speaking my language right now. I like all these movies.
I do too. So I'm also speaking from a personal preference when I say this, but you will want to have at least your front speakers on a separate power amp.
Okay.
So that way they can always get the juice that they need to produce whatever audio they're getting. So like if it's a chase scene, and there's we're chasing a vehicle and we got our, we still have our cohorts behind us, or our buddies behind us, and so their engine's revving loud, their mufflers are sounding out loud. The back speakers are now the only ones, pulling the power. The front channels are, there's no speakers connected, so there's no power being used. So now we have more available power for them because we put a separate amplifier in the power the front.
Right. There's no speakers. The front speakers are no longer connected to the receivers. So so now that power can go to the rears, like you mentioned. So and then just out of curiosity, so when you say amplify the front speakers, do you mean just the left and right, or also the center?
It depends on how far you're willing to go with it. And again, I use those action movies and things as examples because that's where this pays off the most. But the front, I like to have the front stage, all on separate amps. The front left, front right, and center. At least those, for the action movie buff, because that's that's the main. If we can get them their own power that is not being shared with anybody else, we can always get that consistent performance. So if there's explosions in the front and the back and the sides, that front main part, which is, obviously where our attention is being pulled, that always has the power to be as lively and as detailed as it needs to.
Okay.
What'll happen is this, some of the softer sounds, so maybe not necessarily the explosion bass, but because of the bass is there, the exploded parts hitting other things, those types of softer sounds will come through a lot more detailed. We'll be able to hear them.
Okay.
You may not have otherwise known they were even there if you hadn't put a separate amp powering the front speakers.
Right. And I would imagine too, like if you're planning on using the theater as like a listening experience, more for music, probably adding those amplifiers is a big benefit as well.
Yes. Yeah. It definitely helps because now if it's just music and it's just 2-channel, the receiver's not actually pulling power to its amplifier. So it gives us better clarity because we've now separated the amplifier stage and away from the preamp processing part of it.
Right. Okay.
Another thing that's happening now is multi-channel SACDs, the super audio CDs that have the extra bandwidth, DVD audio, which I guess now has progressed into concerts being on to Blu-rays.
Okay.
So when you have surround sound in music, it's the same benefits for the movie, helps out with the music as well.
Oh, okay. All right. Nice. So you mentioned adding amplifiers, and then you mentioned, some of these new CDs and Blu-rays, obviously. So some of the other gear that we're of course going to have to consider is like different source units, right?
Yes. Yeah. We need to make sure that we can get you that content.
Yeah. For sure.
So Blu-ray players, most definitely the 4K UHD player, if you're wanting the best visual experience, we'd want to have one of those as well. And they can play the CDs and often the SACD format as
Hmm.
well. And but if you can get a dedicated CD player, if you're still playing CDs, that actually helps out with their sound, because there's jitter, there's time alignment, the fact that we need to be able to change the spin rate of the disc to either support the faster RPMs for the Blu-rays, or the
Mm.
slower RPMs of the CD. Again, if we're going for music, accuracy of the music, having a CD player dedicated to CD spin rate, and not ever having to be sped up or slowed down to accommodate other formats, helps out with maintaining the even flow or the even read of the information from the disc. Helps reduce again jitter,
Okay.
left and right channel alignment issues.
Okay. Yeah, definitely want to make sure we consider all of that then
Mhm.
when we're picking out those different source units. I also know that isn't there something like a power conditioner that you might want to consider to protect all this gear, or
Oh yes, yeah. If you're putting this investment in, you definitely don't want it to get hurt, with surges. And there's also things that we don't notice, just slight surges. The power, our power net framework isn't always a constant 120. We'll dip down to 110, 105. We can also have minor surges. That's not a true like detrimental surge like a lightning strike,
right?
but you can go up to 130, 135, just because somebody's AC unit turned off, or your refrigerator, your deep freezer, whatever other high power pull equipment you may have, now turns off. So that flow of electrons that was coming in now is no longer needed. So there's a temporary surge on everything.
Okay.
Equipment will survive it, but it does wear down, like the capacitors and things of that nature. So
Mm.
if you can, you want to protect your equipment from the surges. So getting a surge protector line conditioner will help protect against that. And also that equipment,
Hmm.
I don't know if if you may be old enough to remember this, but tube TVs and a
Oh
vacuum
yeah.
cleaner plugged in, you saw the wavy lines.
Yep.
That's because the vacuum's motor causes noise, and even those older TVs could pick up that noise.
Right.
Our more sensitive, better picture, now we've got all this extra detail. It's definitely going to pick up that noise. It may
Hmm.
not be wavy lines, but it will be things like, color isn't, as clear. You might see a temporary blur of a certain part because of it. So we definitely want to filter that stuff out.
Okay.
Keep that noise from again impacting your investment. You want to you want the picture, you want the sound you're paying for. So keeping filtering that out, or maybe even going as far as a voltage regulator. For the for again the purist, because all this equipment's designed to have its optimal performance when we have 120. When it had 120 volt, not more, not less.
Clean power.
So,
Yeah.
yep, no. So clean power, regulated power. So so it's all about the experience, and you don't even have to go to that level at first, as long as you do protect your investment. Get a line conditioner. That's the main thing.
Okay.
And so get that going, and then maybe later on step up to the voltage regulating type. The one that gives you the constant 120. That's still possible because your equipment, you've protected it, so it's still capable of doing its best image. So whenever you want that, you want to get that, you can step up to the voltage regulating type.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, with all this gear coming together, I mean, this is a lot of different components that we're going to need like storage for. How do people usually do that? Like, how can all this gear be like put together? I guess.
Oh yeah, yeah. You definitely need if you got to be able to store it. You don't
Yeah.
want this stuff sitting around on the floor. There's different ways of approaching it. There's entertainment furniture that has wood, that has cabinet doors that you can close, to kind of have it in the room, so maybe you don't go into running your video cables and things through the wall to another room.
Mm,
But if it is a theater room, I mean, if you think about it, theaters, you don't see that.
right.
It's just the equipment that's necessary because of all the equipment that is needed to deliver that experience. So now we can have, we don't need entertainment furniture to make that look clean. You can have racks and things like, something like that put into like an equipment closet,
Right.
and then have your HDMI cable and your video, your audio cable, speaker wire, all that ran through the wall back into the main room, so you have a cleaner look.
Right.
And of course, if you do want to hide the equipment, whether it's in the room or it's in another room, you need to be able to control it. So now we get into things like IR repeater systems, so we can pick up the remote commands, and pass them through these wooden doors,
Yeah.
because wood blocks signals. So your, cabinet doors, your walls, that separate other rooms, they're going to block an IR remote. That signal is not going to get through. So an IR repeater system, could be it's an easy way of having something out exposed but minor.
Right.
It could be so small that you mount it onto the wall and never see it, or or maybe you kind of, if you have a TV, maybe you kind of use some double-sided sticky tape or something like that to stick it to the bottom or the top of it, so
Right.
you can still point your remote forward like we're used to, but we can pick up the commands and relay them to wherever they need to go.
Right. So that perfectly segues into what's going to be our last question is, what accessories do we need? And I do want to reiterate again, like this all boils down to like having an idea ahead of time of like what your goals are for the system and what you're willing to do construction wise, because that is important. Like you said, if you're planning on having all this gear in the same room with you, you want to keep it looking presentable. So you would want to consider some of that furniture that can hide it, or in my build, what we're planning on doing is we're going to have it all in a separate room in a rack. So that will be a fun video, putting together the rack system and installing all that gear into the rack. But yeah, let's go into that last question. So you mentioned the IR repeater system. What other accessories are there? Like, small little things that might be part of a build.
Well, so our repeater system, speaker wire to connect the speakers.
Yep.
If and if we're talking about like in ceiling speakers or the equipment going into another room, you don't want you don't want your wire exposed. You don't want just a hole in the wall. So now we need things like speaker wall plates, maybe HDMI wall plates, something like that to keep it clean, keep it to make it look better, to have it more of a, again, a sealed off room, less dust coming in, that sort of thing. And so we have to consider, that you'll need, of course, your subwoofers. We'll need to connect those with cables. And again, same things to consider. Do we want to hide do we need to hide the wires? There's special cables that they need, like coaxial cable, with special wall plate that can convert that over to an RCA. Or if you have an existing wall plate, that you might want to use that already has the coax connection, maybe you had cable or satellite before and you no longer do, then you need adapters to switch that over to RCA, because that's what subwoofers are going to take, are RCA connections.
Right. Right.
So we we have to consider things. What do we need to hide the wires? Now, if we're not going in wall, there's also kind of like conduit or channels, or plastic channel looking things, for people that don't know the terms.
Yeah.
That you put onto a wall that looks like it might be decorative.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and you can even make it decorative. You can usually paint them,
Mm-hmm.
but it hides the cable, and also routes it rather nicely. There's also flat speaker wire that you might be able to hide behind some baseboard. So these are just things to consider. Like, am I okay with seeing the cables? Do I want to hide them?
Right.
Where's and there are accessories to still make that look clean.
Right. I mean, there's a ton of different stuff that you're probably going to need, right? So that's another good question for you is, when we're planning out our system and I give you my system, goals and what I'd like to achieve, and you put together the list of gear, do you also include, all those small parts in the list?
Yes, yeah,
Oh,
I always do.
nice.
Now, if I have had some customers that are like, I'm not too worried about having, my walls sealed up. I'm okay with seeing a small hole, or I'm only going to have a hole big enough for the wire to come through, and that's fine. But
Hmm.
whenever I'm doing a system build, I'm always thinking of, the experience. And the cleaner things look oftentimes means the better the experience will be for the people, and the better their system will look to their friends, to their
Yeah,
family that come over, because now it's not, now they can tell they actually went the extra mile, because wow, you've got a wall plate for speakers.
yeah.
Some people may not even know that exists.
Yeah, no,
And
that's cool. I mean, I think that's one of the things that people, especially on my channel, might appreciate because we get so deep into like making our car systems perfect and making the wiring all perfect. If you're putting a speaker wire in, you got to have that wall plate. You got to just plug right in. It's nice and convenient, easy to use. So yeah,
yeah,
no, I agree with you.
one thing that we do here, because again, you've got all these cables that eventually plug into a receiver, or plug into, to plug into things. So let's go, maybe you have the Blu-ray player, maybe you have cable or satellite, streamers, game consoles, multiple things that use HDMI. Of course, we already have multiple speaker wire, speakers, using speaker wire, two subs using, subwoofers. So we have, Crutchfield cable labels. So that's an easy way to, once you determine, hey, this is the HDMI cable that's going to run to the projector,
Hmm.
you put a label on it. So that way, if you ever need to, move your equipment for cleaning, for servicing, for whatever purpose, for upgrading, then the cables are labeled, and now it's easier to plug all that equipment into the new device or to reattach it
Right.
after you're done.
So, Paul, that was a ton of great feedback. Is there anything else that you think is kind of important to add into what you would want to consider as part of your system?
The only other thing that I could maybe add in is, if you think you have any plans down the road of adding in, say, audio in other locations, other rooms that you might want to share with, or have come from, the theater room. So I mentioned one of the things was like game day. So you might be outside grilling,
Hmm.
people be inside watching, and or have a patio, that other people might be at, kind of hanging out, chilling, not necessarily wanting to watch the game, but maybe wanting to hear, be able to tell like when something big happens and focus in on it more.
Yeah.
So now we get into speakers and other areas that need to tie in, music that you might want to, distribute that CD, or if you're into streaming, you know, uh, you with that's about the only thing I can think of that I always bring up
Yeah.
is there any goal for that?
The separate zones, right? And yeah, that's something that we ended up planning for in our selection of gear because, like we talked about, what I'm actually planning on doing is having a TV over here behind the bar. And like we discussed, we don't want to, if we're having a party or something like that, we don't want to leave the projector passively on, just like playing a game or whatever, if people aren't really watching it. Whereas we could have the TV playing behind the bar, we can have those speakers associated with that TV zone on that separate zone, so we can play that zone completely separately. So again, it goes back to having some of these ideas for what's possible in your mind before you start planning the total system. But it's great that you bring that up because that's definitely a value add to the overall system. And again, it's something that you could plan for in the initial buying stage, making sure you get a receiver that has zone capability, and then you could upgrade in the future. And like you said, you could add even outdoor speakers and have that wiring running outside and taking all that into account. So
Yeah. So it'd just be more of, if you're planning on doing it, you
yeah.
can get a receiver that's capable of it now, and then just hold off on the equipment, or if you're not planning on it, I mean, that would be one of the upgrade aspects. Like if, hey, I've got this theater system and now I want to share my audio, and here's my plans and here's what I've already got in place.
Right.
Then we can, we can always upgrade it. But if the plans are there, we can go ahead and get a receiver that's capable of it. Just reduces the amount that you end up spending on the system to get your final goal.
Right. Yep. So Paul, thanks for hopping on with us. That was a ton of great feedback. I think anyone watching this now would definitely have a good feel for, some of the initial things to consider. And like we talked about, when you work with Crutchfield, we get to talk to somebody like you and tell you exactly what all of our plans are, and you get to help us out. So that's super cool. Paul is actually the guy that helped me pick out my system. I'm super excited to see all that gear and start bringing it together in these videos for everyone to check out. So Paul, thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, Mark. It was a pleasure.
So as I mentioned earlier, I was able to relay all of the information that pertains to my home theater build to Paul, and he was able to help me make all of the choices for the gear. Paul put together a full list of gear that I was able to modify as needed if I wanted to change anything, everything from the main gear to all of the smaller items I needed. And I now have all of the gear, so coming soon you will be able to see as I build this system. A special thanks to Crutchfield for sponsoring this video. Definitely reach out to them to work with a Crutchfield advisor to plan your home theater system. It makes the experience very, very easy. If you guys want to learn more and take advantage of a special offer, there's a link down in the video description. If you're new here and you want to catch the rest of the home theater build, or if you'd like to learn more about custom car audio, I'd love to have you as a subscriber. Thank you guys for watching.